We've been planning this for a few weeks, so we're excited to finally get to share some of this info with the world. Thanks everyone for joining again. If you want to get started, I think we should be about ready.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll hand it over to you, Judy.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to be co-hosting this live webinar with Titus Talent Strategies. I'm very impressed with this organization in terms of how they work with companies to equip organizations to not only hire but develop talent and retain talent. So my presentation will be focused more on accelerating revenue into a strengthening economy. What can we be doing now as we come out of the deep freeze to reskill and upskill your sales professionals, specifically getting into takeaways that you can implement immediately. So Andy, if we could just move ahead to the next slide. I'm going to just have a brief introduction in terms of what Sandler is, for those of you who are not familiar with us. So in the following slide, Sandler's been around for over 50 years. We are very grateful and fortunate to be considered one of the top 3 sales and sales management organizations globally. We're in 33 different countries around the world. Our materials are translated into, I think now 15 or 16 different languages. We train 30,000 people a year. This year alone, we've done over 3,000 online events to empower people during this unusual period in the economy and the business environment. 50% more salespeople hit those quotas using Sandler systems than without. But what does this mean to all of us? It sounds like a great commercial. The bottom line is we are as successful as we are because we have been able to provide specific strategies, methods, and techniques to sales leaders and their sales teams in all economic environments. So certainly, there's never a time when sales is easy, but in 2020, we've all been dealing with challenges that are particularly unique to this situation that we're dealing with. So moving forward, what do we do now? Well, this is a quote by a professor who's at the University of Wisconsin, and I thought it was particularly germane to this conversation because it's often during the most challenging times where there's the greatest opportunity to redefine ourselves and to look at what we've done before, what works, lean into that, but also see where you have to pivot and change to reflect what's really going on the ground now. And there's been certainly a lot of changes that we have to be mindful of and maybe revisit some of the strategies that we're using in terms of new client acquisition and revenue generation. So going forward, on the next slide.
There you go.
A lot of selling is really a mindset. And for us in the Sandler world, we see the success triangle being extremely important, even before we get into techniques. The techniques, the strategies, the methods, that's actually the easy part. It's having the attitude and behavior in place, the right mindsets that we need to support as sales leaders to be able to be sure that our sales teams are ready, willing, and able to do what's going to be necessary to really meet quotas, meet them and exceed them. Now, most people think that of this success triangle, attitude is the most important. You may get up a certain day, particular week, you don't really feel like your head is in the right place. Today is not a good day for cold calling. I'm not motivated, so I'll wait till tomorrow. And tomorrow you're equally not ready to get into activity. Behavior drives attitude. When we get up and we have a specific game plan, which is usually lacking among many salespeople, when we know what has to be done, what those activities need to be done on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis, that when we start to do those activities, our brain says, hey, this isn't so bad. Maybe I should be doing more of this. And when the attitude actually improves as the behaviors are taking place. So behavior drives attitude. Attitude doesn't drive behavior, which is kind of counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. So when we go, the next slide, Andy, we have to make sure that we are not just going through the motions, but that we have the techniques to be able to execute properly, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have good behaviors, our attitudes improve, but then we have to have the skill sets in order to be effective in moving through the sales funnel. So next slide. Working frantically and sporadically is never going to cut it. Now, I don't know how many of you have people that are working remotely. Probably many people in the call still are either working remotely or have teams that are working remotely. You know, you may be getting emails from people at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning because people are on overdrive. There's a lot of still uncertainty in the environment. This is not a natural, although we're becoming adapted to this, it's not something that we normally enjoy doing, although we're getting used to it. Doing online presentations versus Zoom is an entirely different skill set than being across the table in a conference room, speaking to a prospect or a client. And as sales leaders, we have to really work at making sure that our team are focused on those activities that are going to drive sales rather than spinning into overdrive, doing a lot of auxiliary and secondary activities that are not going to move the ball ahead. What does that mean in implementation? Coaching, staying close to our sales teams, helping them determine what needs to be done and checking in with them, how they're doing, what's going on with their families. A lot of people still have children that are learning remotely or hybrid situation. This is always important, but it is even more significant now. So next slide.
Come on. There we go.
People are overworking, and it's becoming evident that that extra overwork, if it's not channeled in the right directions, becomes detrimental. So we have to check in with the behaviors, the attitudes, and make people know that people have the right skills so that they don't keep repeating behaviors that are not effective. This is something that we've seen across industries and sectors. And the sales leaders giving our folks and our staff the right techniques that they should be using now is really important in the full triangle, the execution of where we need to be in this current environment. So going forward, okay. This is care. What does this mean? This is for your account plans. Keep, attain, recapture, and expand. I think everyone on the call recognizes that to keep an existing client is probably one of the most important and profitable activities that an organization can engage in, because they already know us, we have credibility. They are prone to staying with people who they're happy with. How do we maintain those relationships? They may have a contract that's coming up or nothing's that's coming up. Salespeople have to engage those clients that are on the books to make sure that they know that we're there for them, not just to sell them something else, not just to cross-sell, but check in with them, see how things are going, what's going on in the industry. Are they seeing a renewal pattern of growth in their own shops? What are some of the challenges that they are continuing to be challenged with? Touch points are very important with existing clients so that they know we're there, so that then when they're able to start to re-engage with contract signing and buying from us, they remember that we were there for them during this difficult period, we just didn't check in when they had a new product or a service that we wanted to discuss with them. Attain new accounts. Not everybody feels comfortable because they want to stay in their comfort zone. It's very important to make sure that we have an equal focus on attaining new business. What does that look like? It can be readjusting our cold calling. We're no longer networking at lunches or after evening events. How do we attain new clients? Those are strategies that you have to be very specific with in terms of when you're working with your sales force. Some ideas, increase your presence in the marketplace for thought leadership. Blogs, testimonials are very important. Ask those clients that you have that are your biggest fans to write a testimonial that you can put on your website. Look, let's face it, in the time of fake everything, fake news, fake politics, you name it, third-party stories and endorsements from other people are just going to give more credibility to what you have accomplished for your customers. LinkedIn is really the go-to business platform now. There are over 530 million LinkedIn subscribers now. 80% of traffic that goes to company websites comes from a LinkedIn connection or checking out Titus on LinkedIn and then going to their company website. So you have to develop strategies, thought leadership, panel discussions, do an after hours think with a drink. You moderate it with your company, have some of your clients on it, talking about what's going on in their verticals, some of their suppliers, some of your suppliers, so that it's a 360 resource for people that you're inviting to participate with. Lots of different strategies. Anyone wants to explore some others, reach out to me. Recapture. Those clients that have did business with you and they stopped doing business. They may have gone to a competitor. There may have been a slowdown in their business, so they just pull back in general. Revisit with them. Again, find out what's going in their world, how you can help them as we move through into a recovery stage. Reinitiate contact with them. Don't be afraid to call them. And we haven't had an opportunity to really service you in the past 6 months, 12 months, whatever the time period is. Just wanted to give you a call, see how you're doing, if we may be able to be a resource for you now and going forward. Expand, cross-selling opportunities. What does that look like? How are your people going to existing clients and expanding the services and products that you can offer them to help them get off, come out of this recovery stronger, faster, better. So care, very important. Lots of time to be able to work with your sales teams now to be able to go through this and get together a plan where each individual is going to be accountable for each of these 4 quadrants in their book of business. On our next slide,
Come on.
Andy, you're a little slow on the trigger here.
Yeah, it takes a second.
Okay. What is your ideal client profile? In the beginning of the first quarter of this year, everybody, even C players on the sales team were writing business. We had a good, strong wind to our back. And anybody a lot of companies were just order takers, really than being professional salespeople. Now is the time to decide who is your ideal prospect. So rather than a scattergun approach, it's important to be judicious in really understanding who your ideal client is. Look, who do you best serve? There's certain niches that you are better fit for than others. What are they currently doing? When we say what are their pain indicators, pain simply means where are their performance gaps, that there are challenges where your services and products can fill to make their lives easier. What are the trigger events that they are looking for to be able to know that they are coming out of this pandemic and are participating in an economic recovery? And how can you be part of that game plan? So really having a good structure for an ideal client profile, focus on what you're best at, get your talk tracks down so that you can, when you reach out to people, know how you're going to engage them in a very systematic, logical approach. It doesn't sound scripted, but your salespeople have to have the same kind of approach to clients so they're all singing from the same songbook. As we move ahead,
Mom.
do some account planning. Look at your territories. Find out where your coverage needs to be improved, and maybe in areas where you've been putting too much time, where it's not really producing the results for you that you need. Get more strategic about how you are directing your salespeople in the management of their territory. A lot of times we may be spending a lot of time with one client who's been with us for a long time. There's a great comfort relationship with that individual that your salesperson has, but when you really look at the bottom line, it may not be that profitable or at all profitable for your company. Look at where you're getting your most business and where you want to keep all your clients, but maybe readjust, repivot the allocation of time and resources to those companies that have the most potential and really hitting the bottom line. Do a SWOT analysis. When business is rolling in aggressively, most organizations don't focus on this. What's SWOT? What are your strengths? What are you really, really good at? What do you do better than the competition? What do you want to be known for? What are your weaknesses? Let's face it, every organization has an Achilles heel. What is it at your company? How can you improve it? If it's a weakness that's going to take a while to readjust to bring up to a higher level, how are you going to handle that when maybe other people bring it up? Competitors, prospects, know what your weaknesses are as well as your strengths, and make sure you share that and explain it with your sales team. What are the opportunities out there? Because there are always opportunities. It's the way we look at a situation that determines the outcome. Know what your opportunities are in a very clear and specific approach. And then also look at the techniques that your people are using as they're going out. Where is your greatest growth potential? Now is the time to take a very forensic view of where you are going to be able to do your best. In terms of profit margins, do you have new verticals? Are there certain industries that you normally cover that are coming out of the deep freeze, or they're just still frozen because of their industry? Travel, entertainment, some of those business segments are still struggling. So where do you need to pivot to focus your time on those other companies and industries that are doing well? What are your new products? How are those sales pitches have to be shifted now? Because the period of the one call close, ladies and gentlemen, is over. We have to be able to make sure that our talk tracks and that our 30-second commercials have been shifted to the environment. Just to call up in the traditional spiel of benefits and features of these products, these services, falls flat. You have to really find out what the challenges are. Make sure your people have the type of questioning strategies that are needed to get the prospect talking rather than listening. Most salespeople speak 70% of the time and listen only 30% of the time. But as sales professionals, we should be paid to get much more information than we're given. Because if we don't really know what's going on with that prospect, and be able to understand what the real motivators are for their buying decision or what their pain is, then we're just wasting our time and theirs. Normally, there are 3 levels of what we call pain at Sandler. There's a surface problem. That's easy. That's a smoke and mirror. They're going to just tell you, well, we're kind of looking around at some other opportunities. We may want to expand our vendors. Just checking what's going on in the marketplace. Okay, everybody may say that. But what's the reason that they're looking around? What's happening with their current supplier situation that is impacting negatively their business? Maybe it's quality control. Maybe it's missed deadlines. Maybe it's the competitors are not able to meet their changing needs. And then at least you have something to think about in terms of how you're going to get that new business. But most importantly, when you get through surface, business, and what the real impact is to the individual, if those things don't change, how does that impact the owner of the company? Does it mean that they can't retain talent? Does it mean they can't hire properly? And Andy's going to discuss some of these techniques in terms of using assessments that are so predictive and impactful. When you get down to the individual impact, that's where you really have your greatest opportunity, because it's about filling the real buying decision on the part of the prospect. That's when you have the greatest probability of closing the sale. So going forward, Andy, we have the next slide.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so here you plan and debrief your sales strategies. Winging it are for birds. We're not birds, we're sales professionals. And there has to be a process of pre-call planning and debriefing. What do I mean by pre-call planning? The next slide, Andy. Not only do we have to know who we're going to be calling on a daily basis, but we have to know what we want to accomplish on that particular call. It's not just, hi, Judy Taibi from Sandler, you have a few minutes for me. And I want to know exactly who I'm speaking to, who I'm trying to get to, what I am hoping to accomplish on that call. Is it just an introductory call? Do I want to use that as an opportunity to pique their interest to then set up a longer call rather than trying to get 15 minutes with them where they had no anticipation of my coming in for a conversation? Want to know how much time is available? What decisions are going to be made at the end of the call? What am I hoping they're not going to ask me? Because people will say, look, I've been in the business 25 years. I don't know how, I don't need to do any quick pre-call planning. This isn't for me. But a lot of times what we find with people who have a lot of years in the industry, in their positions, they may have been doing something for 25 years, but they really have the experience of 1 year, and they're doing that over and over and over for 25 years. The environment has changed. It's a change in the past 24 months, certainly in the past 12 months. And we have to be able to swallow our egos and adjust so that we are using the best approaches when we're on the ground now to win not only the battle, but the war. So going forward, pre-call planning, you have to make sure that your people are doing it. You have to coach them. And this is the greatest opportunity, because you can help them strategize what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, and be able to make sure that that's going to be something that's going to be effective for them and for your organization. So the next slide on debriefing, when that call is over, it's within the hour, you should be writing down what you discovered their challenges, their pains were. What are the most viable solutions you have to fix that? Do they have the time, the money? And the budget is just not having the do-re-mi to pay you? Do they have the inclination to commit to helping you implement what the plan is? Are they going to be able to do an onboarding if it's necessary so that the right people with their organizations are going to be working with you to make sure that the implementation is good? What are the resources? What is the next clear step? How many salespeople get off a call and thanks, great call. We'll speak to you in, next month, Judy. That doesn't cut it. When are we going to speak? What are we going to accomplish? Who will be on the next call? What do you need from me so that I can make this a productive use of both of our time? And what if this doesn't happen? What's the impact on the prospect if they don't work with you? What's the downside for them if they just choose to ignore the situation and let it to continue? So lastly, I know we're getting a little tight on time. Go through the next one, Andy. Andy, can we continue?
Go.
Okay, these are some of the behaviors that you have to measure. Don't measure outcomes. How many accounts are closing? How many people are you ready to sign off? You measure behaviors because you can control behaviors. You can't control whether someone's going to do a deal or not. So as sales leaders, focus on the behaviors, make sure your people are doing that consistently. And the next slide is measure the process. In fact, what you should do is write down what your sales process is. Because if you have 5 salespeople or 10 salespeople, ask them to write down the process that they use. There should be the same process. They, I can assure you, will usually have no process, or they'll all be different. You'll think they're from 10 different organizations. Every sales process has to be logical, linear, with certain activities and steps and desired outcomes in order to move that prospect through the sales funnel. It's like driving across country. If you don't know what road you're taking, honey, you're going to get lost. This way, it's consistent, effective, and efficient. And whether you're using the Sandler sales process or you design one for yourself or using a competitor's, have a specific process in place and make sure everybody is using it in the same way. So identify, discover, demo, contract, close. Next slide. This is just what we use. It's a 7-step process. It takes you from bonding, communication, and bonding. Sales is really a communication model. We're selling all the time. Who's going to go to whose family for Christmas? Who's going to pick up the kids? On and on. Communication is very important. We use an assessment that Andy may be discussing in terms of determining how we as salespeople, what our own behavioral preferences are in communication style. It's important to know that, but it's more important to know what the other types of communication preferences are, which they're basically for, because we need to adjust and pivot and model and match our prospect so that we are communicating with the way they want to be communicated with, not the way we want to be communicated with. We're not there to make friends. We're not there to get our emotional needs met. We're there to make our prospects feel okay and know that we're listening to them. We don't have time to go through these really various stages, but they all should be in any sales process. Going forward, I think I have 2 more minutes. Andy, could you move to the next slide, please?
Yep. Delay, okay.
Okay, so clear next steps. This is one of the Achilles heel for most salespeople. At the beginning, if I'm going to have a call, I want to know what our agreed agenda is, what that prospect wants to hear from me, what I want to hear from them. I always say, you know, Andy, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Not that I'm trying to be nosy or invasive, but I want to understand what's relevant in your world. And of course, I'm very happy to answer all and any questions that you have for me. So how much time do we have? Will anybody else be on the call? When we get through the call, if we cover all the points that we are we come to a mutual agreement that we may be a resource, what would be the next step? And I confirm that back in an email, because the one thing that nobody likes are surprises, especially when they're dealing with salespeople, because they always think we have a hidden agenda. And I will always say at the end of the first meeting, if we're not your cup of tea, if you don't feel that we're the right resource, can I count on you to tell me, Judy, I appreciate the time, but this doesn't fit in our game plan. Thank you, but we're not going to have an opportunity to do business. I'm a grown-up. I can take it, but can you be honest with me and just tell me that? Because I don't want to become a pest. And also, if I feel that I can't really be an asset to your organization, that we're not in alignment, will you be okay if I tell you that? Because I don't want any misunderstandings. I have had people tell me, thank you so much. No one has ever told me, if I'm not interested, it's okay to pull the plug. It takes off the tension even before you get into that call. Very important. We have some strategies that make it easy for salespeople to implement that so that they don't end up doing a lot of free consulting and wasting their time and becoming a nuisance. So going forward, cookbooks, which is simply specific activities and behaviors that have to be done consistently on a periodic basis. Role playing, if you're not role playing with your sales team, you're losing a great opportunity. I always say, I don't believe in this concept of safe spaces because I don't believe that they have any correlation to reality. But when I do role playing with salespeople, I say, this is a safe space. This is the time to be able to role play simulation. Let's make the mistakes here in the training room so that you can have the confidence and the competency. So when it's game time, you'll be able to really hit your mark. Create time blocks, monkey paws. A lot of times, particularly now, people are still very uncertain about what's really going to go on. And particularly if you have a new client and you're proposing a pretty substantial deal, they may be a little reluctant to sign off on that because they don't have any experience with you. A monkey's paw, just a term that we use, instead of going for the full contract, start small. Give it an opportunity for them to get to know you on a smaller piece of the business so that you build the credibility and that they can see that you're seriously devoted to making their solution work. Much easier to go from that and expand it rather than going for the full Mountie all at the same time. Playbooks, very important. Coaching your salespeople now is so critical because they need to be able, as we come out of this period into a recovery, to have built the emotional muscle to be able to really go forward aggressively. So in closing, next slide, I'm going to just be sending out to everybody on the call a sales effectiveness survey. It may take you 10 minutes to fill out. Use it as a self-diagnostic tool. My clients love it because sometimes you're just not hitting your stride, but you're not quite sure what's wrong. This will help you identify that. Use it for internal discussion. If you want to fill it out, send it to me. Happy to have a 15 or 20-minute call with you just to debrief and give you some ideas and strategies. And also some great library of white papers in terms of how to lead a remote sales team and also how to really be able to maximize coming out of the pandemic. So you have my contact information. Delighted to be able to hear from you. If you want to reach out, I will be sending this out. Use it or not. I think it's a great diagnostic, that survey, and be happy to continue a conversation with you. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Andy now. He has a lot of exciting content because if you don't have the right people in the right seats, it makes everything that we just discussed that much more challenging. So Andy, why don't you go through your presentation? to see all the excellent tools that you have.
Sure. Thank you, Judy. So before we dive in, I did see some questions that came in, and we will respond to those individually. We'll follow up with you on the answers to those questions, but thanks for joining, everyone. I'm Andy Campbell. I'm a director at Titus Talent. Today, before I get into it, I wanted to sort of explain the why behind the what. Some of our clients right now are hiring. Some of our clients are not hiring. I think COVID has impacted various industries differently, and I wanted to provide something that everyone could benefit from, whether you're hiring or not. So if you're not hiring, what are you doing to assess your existing talent and make sure you have the right people in the right seats to come out of this as strong as possible? So there's some specific technologies and tools that we can use for both scenarios, whether you're hiring or not. And we'll get into that a little bit. So here's some of the, within Predictive Index we're a licensed partner of Predictive Index. And through that technology, here's some of the doors that we're able to help our clients open. It could be hiring, it could be employee engagement and retention, team development, discovering high performers and leaders, and then developing high-performing sales teams. That's really where we've kind of partnered with Sandler and Judy, and how her team can help us do that. But before we get into any of those doors, the way that we're able to help our clients discover which doors they'd like to open or where can they use the most help, we have a talent optimization tool or a checkup that we can send you. And I will be sending this to everyone in the webinar. And you can take this, and so there's different pieces of the wheel, and it could be employee recognition, employee branding, and talent acquisition, onboarding, and retention. So you can take this checkup, and based on your answers, you can see on the left here, you answer each question, and based on your answers, it'll generate a scorecard. This will tell you what areas you're strong in and what areas you could use some help in. So based on your scorecard, we can help identify which doors you'd like help opening. So let's just say, for example, you want to start with hiring and onboarding. We'll start with that door. Titus has a proprietary system called Head, Heart, and Briefcase. And when it comes to hiring, most of the companies that we talk to are hiring mostly around briefcase. Somebody's career achievements, the resume, the things they've done. And with that, maybe a panel of interviews and just that collective agreement on, yes, we like this person, we're gonna hire them. Without using any sort of tools or assessments within your hiring process and doing things that way, you have a very low percentage chance of success in hiring. So using an assessment tool, we prefer Predictive Index, but using an assessment tool, you're increasing your chances significantly from about 6-7% to 58%. So applying both a behavioral and cognitive assessment within Predictive Index can get you into some respectable numbers and in terms of your success of hiring. A little bit about Predictive Index. It's been around since the 50s. There's only over 500 validity studies that they've done. I think they invested $75 million into their technology last year. It's one of the most validated assessment tools, and one of the only EEOC compliant assessment tools. A lot of assessment tools like DISC or things similar are not EEOC compliant, so they could not be used in hiring. It's also written in 70 different languages, including Braille. And then there's a cognitive assessment, which is the same assessment as the Wonderlic within Predictive Index. But this is a 12-minute timed assessment. And what this tells our clients is not necessarily how smart someone is, but how fast they can ramp up in the role. So for us, going back to Head, Heart, and Briefcase, Predictive Index for us takes care of the head component. And then there's the heart and understanding a candidate's core values and how they align with your organizations. And of course, their briefcase, what are their significant career achievements, the things that they've done. But here's some of the Predictive Index users out there. You can see some pretty big names that are believers and users of Predictive Index. So we're excited to be using it as well. So let's just start with, how do you start with when you're hiring? Where's the first place to start? And a lot of that is with gaining alignment with your stakeholders. So you might have, different hiring managers or your executive team or different leaders that have a say in making a specific hire. And so what we can do is within Predictive Index, we can have our clients take what's called a job assessment. And based on your answers, it generates a profile. So you can say, here are the things that I need this person to be able to do. And so the people who know the role intimately, so it could be the person that you're hiring that the hire is going to be reporting to, or any other stakeholders that know that role. But based on their answers, it'll generate a profile. And that, elicits a conversation between your stakeholders to say, well, here was my answer and why, what I think is an ideal profile for this role. But I see that your answers were much different. So based on that, you have a conversation within your stakeholders to agree on what an ideal candidate looks like before you start looking for that candidate. So what we're measuring with Predictive Index, and it is similar to some other assessment tools out there, but you're measuring the A trait is dominance, B is extroversion, C is patience or pace, and D is formality, or a lot of times attention to detail. So those are the things that you're measuring, and there's different combinations and how those traits interact with each other. But just to give you a sort of a basic level of what we're looking at, when someone takes an assessment, it generates a profile. There's a self, so that's basically who you are. The self concept is the adjustments that you're making in your role. And that's the reason that's important is you might see someone that's wired a certain way in their self in the top profile. If the bottom one if the middle, the self concept is significantly different, you may recognize someone that's stretched, that they are outside of their comfort zone. And that may be something to think about. And then the synthesis, that bottom pattern that you're looking at is kind of the combination of the self and self concept. Okay, so now let's say you've identified what that ideal profile looks like. You're ready to go start looking for the candidates. So one thing Titus can help our clients do is generate a database for you. So we go out into the market and find these people, whether it's through LinkedIn. We can get creative and use a lot of different technologies to find candidates, but we'll build a database for our clients to say, here are all the candidates within a commutable distance of your location. And we'll start engaging them. And so once we have candidates that are interested and we get them in dialogue, we get their interest in the role. They're leaning in, okay, this does sound like maybe a great fit for me. What's the next step? So we can have that candidate take a behavioral assessment. So we want to understand who they are and how they're wired. And once they take the assessment, what you're looking at here is it's a comparison between the candidate's profile and the ideal profile. So you have those orange boxes that you see, that's the ideal profile that's generated from the stakeholders when you're gaining alignment. And then the pattern that you see is the candidate's pattern. And so you might see some misalignments between your ideal pattern and the candidates, or some alignments. And so what you can use that to generate questions to ask that candidate. Let's say if you see a misalignment somewhere, within Predictive Index, it'll generate this interview guide. And so this is an interview guide that we can give a hiring manager to say, hey, here's the candidate's profile. Here's how it compares to your ideal profile. And here's some questions that you can ask that address any misalignments in that profile and also confirm the alignments. So that's a pretty handy tool to give to a hiring manager that may not have a lot of time to prepare for an interview. I'm sure some of you have been in that interview where the person interviewing you is actually reading your resume while they're interviewing you, and they're not really prepared. So here's something that we can give to a hiring manager to be better prepared and to have great questions to ask to address any of those misalignments or confirm alignments. So there's the interview guide. So now let's say we're going to take it a step further, and we like a candidate, we're going to make an offer. So now we want to focus on onboarding and employee engagement and retention. So what are the things we can do to make sure we are keeping these people and keeping them engaged? So within predictive index, again, there's a management strategy. So what does the incumbent need and what truly motivates them from day one? So this is something we can give to their manager, say, here's this person you're hiring, and here's some suggestions on how to best onboard them. What support system do they need, and do you have the right people to support them? So this is a way for the hiring manager to understand who they're bringing in, but how are they going to relate to them or the person that they're going to be reporting to. So that's how we can onboard effectively. And then here's what's called a relationship guide, so you can see the candidate's profile and their boss's profile. It'll show relationship strengths between the two, and then maybe some caution areas. Here's some things you should be aware of when you guys are working together. So that's how you can help onboard effectively. And then this is what's called a coaching guide. So this is something you can do that we do at Titus quarterly. We like to encourage quarterly, even monthly sometimes. If you wait to like an annual review, it might be too late. You might have lost that person already. So this is something that you can go through with the person that you hired. Let's just say quarterly, and you can check these boxes to say, am I giving this person the things that they need to be successful? And then the candidate or the hire will also take this, and it elicits a conversation between the two to say, hey, here are what my answers were, and here's what your answers were. Let's talk about it. So you can build a long-term strategy and make sure that you're doing, giving your people the things that they need to be successful. Taking it a step further, some of our clients maybe they're not hiring, but they need to focus on their team development or engagement. So opening that door, here's a tool that we can use to first kind of understand yourself. So understanding your strengths or blind spots for each team member. So this is an example of a profile. So the captain is the name of one of the profiles, but it'll show needs, behaviors, work styles, strengths, common traps, how to work well with these people. So this is a way for you to you could give the assessment to your existing employees to understand who they are and do you have the right people in the right seats.
Can I just jump in here, Andy, because I think this is so important.
Sure.
Not only do you as the manager understand your people, but when you share this with your team, they understand each other better. So there may be somebody on the sales team who's a captain or high D. They're very dominant. They're very independent. They're really risk takers. A very different profile from other people in the team. So when they really start to present themselves as the captain, I've seen people say, oh, that's just Joe. He's just being very captain today. And it increases the willingness to accept people who they are because they understand each other better. So I think this is just brilliant. It's a strong, strong tool.
Yeah, thank you. So, taking this a step further, you can use these tools to understand each person's profile. What's their what's their dominant trait look like? Extroversion, patience, pace, formality, strengths, caution areas. And this provides some actionable items to work through with your existing teams. And then opening the discovering high performing leaders door. So this is something we did at Titus, which I found really interesting. You can have let's say we had, I think it was 15 salespeople take the assessment, and then we had operations people take the assessment. We had our leadership team take the assessment, and you can see where people fall on this wheel with teamwork and employee experience, process and precision, results and discipline. And you can find where you might have some opportunities on your team if you see that there's a significant amount of people in the same piece of that pie. Well, who are you going to have to keep the wheels on the bus if you don't have anyone in that process and precision piece or anyone in the results and discipline piece? So this is a way for you to identify top performers, specific attributes that defined your most valuable teammates so you can see similarities. And taking that a step further, actually, I think I missed that last slide, but so you can see comparisons between your people. So you can see similarities like, wow, I didn't realize we had so many captains, but we have 0 ultras or 0, different profiles that you need to have a well-balanced team. So that's a way of identifying key players within your teams that maybe you didn't know that you had some gaps or things that you needed to make your team stronger. So anyway, like I mentioned, I will be sending everyone the talent checkup. And if anyone has interest in the behavioral component of Predictive Index, I can send you a link to take the behavioral assessment, understand your personal profile. And we could set up a read back to show you what that looks like, and maybe even put together some strategies for your team. So yeah, those are just some specific technologies that, specifically with Predictive Index that our clients are utilizing our help to say, hey, how can we hire smarter? But also, if we're not hiring, maybe we're not in a position where we're growing, but what can we do to assess our existing team and make sure that we have the right people in the right seats to come out of this stronger? So with that being said, I'll hand it over. We had some questions, if we have some time, that came in. We can try to address some of those questions. Let me see if I pull those up. I think this one could be more for you, Judy. What do you do when you come into a new role and there are legacy sales reps that don't use a CRM or are scared to and won't, yet have strong relationships?
Well, I get this quite often, particularly on teams where they're multi-generational salespeople. In fact, now I think is the first time ever in the United States where on sales teams you have people across 4 different or 5 different generations. So there's a real difference in approach. And how do you manage all that as your salesperson? If that's what you mean by legacy, people who have been there for a long period of time. What I do is I just would meet with everybody individually. If I want them to, everyone who wants to use a CRM, I meet with them individually to find out how they're managing their behaviors. Just curious, we're implementing something, that we think is going to be a better resource for you. But I'd like to know what you're doing now so that I can better support you. And then once you have that and you know where the pullback and the pushback are going to be from individuals, you'll be able to roll this out at a group meeting a lot more effectively because you know what the mindset and where people are coming from. Sometimes with legacy salespeople, you're coming new into this role, they may have seen a succession of people who have now been in your place, and hopefully it's not every 12 months they're rolling people in and out as the new head of sales, because then they say, well, this is just the latest flavor of vanilla ice cream that they want us to learn to like. If that's the case, you're going to have a little bit of a hurdle in creating credibility. But for the legacy people, I just say, listen, can you tell me what you're doing? You're very successful. What we're going to be talking about is using a CRM. It's going to be different, but it's going to, once you get used to it, it's going to make your life easier. I need you to be a role model to some of the younger people on your sales team. And I hope I can count on your support to at least give it an opportunity. What kind of phone are you using, Andy? He's going to show me a smartphone. Well, you're not still using a flip phone, right? You're certainly not using a landline. You've started to use technology on your own that's made you more effective and efficient. That's all that CRM is. It's not a way to micromanage you. This isn't about us. This is about the company investing in a proven tool to make you even more effective. Let me just explain to you how it works. It's going to make your life easier once you get used to it. But you're going to have to try it and implement it to know that what I'm telling you is going to make your life better. And I hope I can count on you to be able to be a leader in supporting us, because the younger folks on the sales team look up to you, Andy. And if they just see that you're just going to blow it off and not use it, you know, they're going to follow suit. And I need you to work with me on this. Play to their ego. You all have egos. And when you engage people from a servant leadership mentality, that they know you're there to help them rather than to dictate to them, I think you're going to see a shift in behavior.
Another question, I think for you, Judy, is sales training more for larger corporations with large sales teams?
Well, you know, large sales teams at large global companies, they understand the importance of consistency in sales. They have a sales process. Everybody can implement it and makes your life as a sales manager so much better. Because when I go out on a call, how'd it go, Judy? Oh, went great. Andy, how'd it go? Oh, super call. Well, what does that mean? You don't know as a manager. By being able to say, well, where are you in the process? What's the next step? What kind of questioning strategies did you use? Tell me about the pain that you discovered. Where do our solutions really fit fixing that for them? It just makes everything much more transparent. And large organizations have their own internal sales training departments because they have to drive to the bottom line. They have investors, they may be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They can't mess around with this. But on stronger, smaller to mid-sized companies, it's even more important that you have the same kind of a sales process in place, because you can be the best provider of your product and service. If you don't have a strong sales process and an upskilled sales team, you may not be around long enough to really bring to the marketplace those advantages and assets that you have. So small, mid-sized companies mirror and match these big dogs who are doing it so well. Get a sales process in place, embedded, and implemented.
Another question that came in, it says, my company is not expanding right now. We're on a hiring freeze. Do you mostly use your assessments in hiring? I would say no, we don't mostly use them in hiring. We have a lot of clients that, you know, are in the similar situations where they're not hiring or not expanding now, but they want to assess their teams to understand their you know, individual profiles and where they might position people in other places or make adjustments to make sure they have the right people in the right seats, but not, you know, maybe they're not hiring, but they want to look at their existing teams for engagement and retention. Those are things you can do outside of using it for hiring. So yeah, absolutely. If you're in that situation, we can help you identify those things and help you assess your teammates. Sometimes we can start with individual teams or even your whole company, depending on the size, but it's something that's definitely used outside of just hiring.
May I build on that for a minute, Andy? Because
Yeah.
I'm such a fan of assessments. Most people leave an organization because they feel that company doesn't really care. They're not investing in them. They don't really know what their individual goals are. And particularly out in Wisconsin, some of the northern regions of the country, no one's going to get up, feel motivated on a day when you're having a blizzard and it's 18 degrees below zero. I don't care what kind of macho vehicle you have to get to work. They don't care that you want to see, they know that you want a goal of sales increasing 15, 20%, whatever. But if they know that you don't know what really drives their engine, they're less engaged. And these kinds of assessments are very important so that there are demonstrated activities that they know that you care about them on an individual level. People leave companies because they feel the companies and the managers don't get them and don't know about them. And you may be in a hiring freeze, but there are other companies that are starting to poach your best talent. And this is an outstanding way for talent retention, these assessments, You're going to learn a lot more about your people. They're going to be more committed to you. You're going to be able to support them better. So just a commercial. I've seen it change organizations.
It's a great point. Those were all of the questions that we had. I think we're running 1 minute over time. So thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited to share these things with you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Judy or myself individually. And we have some things that we can share with you. We'll follow up and share those items that we said we would share with you. Anything you wanted to add, Judy?
Just thank you for your time. A great opportunity to share these resources with you. Great selling. Knock 'em dead.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.